It is
Yes.
time for a chat with Pat.
Yeah, and today it is Anne Hendershott, Dr. Anne Hendershott. She is professor of sociology and director of the Veritas Center for Ethics in Public Life at Franciscan University in Steubenville, Ohio. And Anne's been on the show before. Thank you, Anne. Good to hear from you today.
Well, thank you, Pat. I'm happy to be on. Not happy to be talking about this topic, but it's important that we talk about it as Catholics.
It definitely is. And the topic today is from an article that Anne wrote in the Catholic World Report called France Moves Ahead with Legalizing of Assisted Dying. So tell us a little bit, what is going on in France and where are we at with this this bill that they're talking about? And
Yes.
what are we seeing this movement in France? Tell us about it.
Well, it's not just France, sadly. It's
Yeah,
going
yeah.
throughout Europe. I mean, we were the ones that kind of started all this, although Switzerland was the one. Assisted dying, they call it assisted dying. It's really assisted suicide. And as Catholics, we know that's sinful. But the lower house of Parliament voted 305 to 199 in favor of legalizing what they're calling assisted dying. And they're joining a number of others and other places throughout Europe. Like I said, the Netherlands, Belgium, Spain, they all have assisted dying or assisted suicide. And in this country, we have 11 states that allow assisted suicide, and New York is just the latest. They just approved a bill allowing medically assisted suicide. They call it the MAID bill, M-A-I-D, medical aid in dying. We put these nice euphemisms
We do.
on suicide, on killing people, because that's what they're doing. Now, the New York thing is not killing people, but a lot of the places throughout Europe, a caregiver is allowed to kill someone with their permission, of course.
Of course, yeah.
It's hard
yeah,
to
like
say it that way, you know.
I know.
But it's
Consent makes
terrible.
everything okay, Anne. You know, if you consent to it,
I know.
it's what could possibly be wrong, right? So,
Well, that's
tell
the
me.
thing. Everybody says that there's a slippery slope, but I would argue we've already gone down the slippery slope.
Yes.
It's supposed to be for people in intractable pain, terminally ill, but it's not. I mean, there are people with anorexia that are getting assisted suicide. There was this one transgender woman, a woman who became a man in Belgium, and she was so unhappy with her surgery. She said she felt like a monster, and she requested assisted suicide, and they gave it to her. She was 30 years old. Her name is
I know.
Nancy, and she didn't like being a woman. She wanted to become a man, and then once they do these surgeries, she became, in her own eyes, grotesque. She called it, she said, I've become a monster. And she was given assisted suicide in Belgium.
Well,
so
I
it's
find
not
it
just for the terminally ill.
right. And I find it interesting, like the Prime Minister and the President claim to be Catholic. But this doesn't, in France. It doesn't obviously affect the way they lead the country?
No, obviously not. They would say that they would abstain from voting, sort of like, you know, I might be against it, but I wouldn't want to stop others from doing it. It reminds the whole argument, and I'm glad you brought this up, reminds me of the pro-choice movement in this country and elsewhere. You know, these politicians that used to say, I'm personally opposed, but I wouldn't stop someone from getting an abortion. Well, that's what's happening here. And the worst part is in some of these countries, and here in the United States and in Canada, we are requiring doctors to refer people for assisted suicide if they're against it themselves. They won't give them the pills, but they'll tell them where to get them, which I argue in my article, as Catholics, that's complicit with evil. It's sinful behavior in and of itself if you're enabling a suicide, even if you're not giving them the pills. So it's a real problem. Real problem.
It really is. And one of the things I notice, and this happens all the time, is the hyperbole, the language that they use to scare people into voting for this. And I'm just going to quote this real quick from your article. This is what this Death with Dignity is talking about. 17 people a day will suffer when they die. People are being forced to endure unbelievable suffering at the end of life. Some will retch at the stench of their own body rotting. Some will vomit their own feces. Some will suffocate slowly, inexorably over several days. Their last moments of life disfigured by terror. Oh my gosh!
You'd almost want to sign up yourself if you believe that.
Yeah.
And we don't have that in Western medicine. We have ways to control pain.
Yes.
No one should suffer, and no one has to suffer. And that's to scare people. And, that's very effective because there's so many people that are supporting this and wanting to, because they see it as, compassionate.
Compassion.
Just like the death with dignity euphemism, or the group that used to be called the Hemlock Society is now called Compassionate Choices. Because we're viewed, I remember I was on a panel once, and all the people on the panel except me were in favor of this, and they were all in favor of a bill called Death with Dignity. And they came to me and they said, so you're not in favor of death with dignity, right? And I'm like, no, I want death with dignity, but I don't want assisted suicide. They do that all the time, the way they use language. But,
language.
When you talk to people who, it's terrible. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I didn't mean to step on you there. But talk a little bit more about these conscience protections, because that's one of the ways they try to get around it.
Yes. Conscience protections only go so far once the Death with Dignity movement gains power. It's like the pro-life crisis pregnancy laws. Some states require pro-life centers to refer women. Now, the Supreme Court has come out and said you can't require speech. That's kind of unconstitutional. But in Europe, they don't have that kind of protection with their constitutions. Right. And so even if physicians like in Canada, if they refuse to participate in assisted suicide, they are breaking the law. They're required by law to refer suicidal patients, those who want it, to someone who will help them. And so they don't have a choice. Yeah, it's uncertain. In France, there's a conscience clause, so for medical personnel to opt out of participating. But the proposed legislation includes a penalty of 2 years in prison for anyone who attempts to block an act of assisted suicide. So if you are courageous and you are trying to talk someone out of it, or not giving them the kind of support that they think, you could serve time in prison for that.
Oh, my.
Now, that's frightening.
It is. And I think just this whole idea, you kind of end your article talking about how participating in an assisted suicide affects the people that are left behind that have been a part of it. And I think that's so important for us to understand. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Because if you have a relative who commits suicide, your likelihood of committing suicide goes up. And this Andrew Solomon, who is a great writer, and he wrote a book, an article called A Death of One's Own, and he talked about helping his mother commit suicide. And at the time, he really thought he was helping her, and he still does on some level, but he said in his article that anybody who assists in this realizes how toxic this is. Somewhat toxic, he wrote to everyone. Yeah. And his best-selling book, The Noonday Demon, he talks about his depression, and a massive depression where he takes over a dozen antidepressants every day.
Yeah.
And he talks about how his family life, and he fell apart after the assisted suicide because it is toxic. Nobody has the right to take another life. We just don't. Whether it's at the start of life or the unborn life or the end of life, we don't have that right. That's God's right.
Oh. That's right. Well, thank you, Anne, for being with us today. This is an excellent article.
All right. Happy to be on. Thank you.
Thanks. And our guest, Anne Hendershott, Professor of Sociology, Director of the Veritas Center for Ethics at Franciscan University in Steubenville.
What a great, kind of expose that really kind of shakes you up and wakes you up a little bit. And it's amazing to me that, when she said about suicides kind of run, if you know someone who has, then you might be more likely. You would think they'd be horrified by what they experienced through that other person's suicide. So,
But the psychic pain of helping somebody to die affects you,
Thank you, Pat, and thank you, Anne, and thank you, listeners, for joining us for Morning Offering.